Here are some of the big stories the Financial Times will be watching in the week ahead. Brazil's political class under fire as the country goes to the polls in a general election. The spotlight will be on electric vehicles when the world's big car companies gather at the Paris Motor Show. And the UK Conservative Party holds its annual conference in Birmingham. First to Brazil, which goes to the polls in a presidential election on Sunday. Brazil's 147 million voters have been bombarded with tales of corruption in recent years, and there's widespread anger at the political class. For analysts, this is turning out to be the most polarising vote in Brazil's recent history. For markets, it's turning into a nightmare scenario, the left against the far right. The worry is that Brazil will be sentenced to another 4 years of gruesome political infighting. Investors are also increasingly nervous that voters could elect a president who's unwilling or unable to implement necessary but politically thorny economic reforms to fix Brazil's fiscal imbalances.
After many months of uncertainty, opinion polls are finally showing that the presidential vote is shaping up to be a two-horse race between the far-right Jair Bolsonaro and the leftist Workers' Party candidate Fernando Haddad. Bolsonaro, who's currently recovering in this hospital after being stabbed while on the campaign trail in early September, leads the latest polls with around 28%. That is 6 points clear of Haddad, who is the anointed candidate of former President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, who is in prison on corruption charges. Most likely, these two leading candidates will have to face each other on what promises to be a highly polarized second-round runoff at the end of October.
And now to France, where the world's car makers are gathering this week at the Paris Motor Show. But the event comes at a time of uncertainty for the global automotive industry. Trade tensions with the US threaten global production models of many manufacturers, while new EU testing rules have forced some cars off the road, while manufacturers seek approval for their vehicles under new rules. But the upcoming EU rules over CO2 emissions, designed in part to spur development and sale of electric vehicles, will be at the forefront of most companies' minds. Car makers need to hit the targets of an average of 95 grams of CO2 per kilometre in 2020 across their fleets, or face crippling fines. Electric vehicles, which gain super credits and help them offset against more polluting vehicles, will be key to these, which is why a deluge of battery models is coming to market in the next 2 years.
It's the first chance many of the public will get a chance to see the new electric Mercedes, the new electric Audi, the first wave of cars from established premium manufacturers that will take on Tesla in the pure electric car market. Now, this is incredibly important for the established manufacturers because many of them have to hit incredibly stringent EU targets that come into force in 2020 and 2021. Selling electric cars to the public are crucial for many of those companies to hit those targets because those electric cars get super credits and they can offset them against dirtier vehicles. Now, it's important to know that many of the manufacturers have been hoping to use diesel sales to lower their CO2 output, but appetite across Europe for diesel sales has collapsed. Sales have fallen from around 50% of sales to 30%, and for many of them they expect them to carry on falling. So diesel is no longer the attractive option it once was for many of the largest car manufacturers.
And finally to Birmingham, where the UK Conservative Party is meeting this week for its annual conference. Prime Minister Theresa May will face growing pressure from ministers, MPs and grassroots members over her Brexit strategy. Many will be urging her to drop plans for a softer Brexit and instead pursue a looser relationship with the EU. In turn, Mrs May will argue that her strategy is the only one that can result in a sensible Brexit deal. Questions about Mrs May's position will also be raised, as this could be her last conference as Prime Minister and party leader. Given that the opposition Labour Party enjoyed a successful conference in Liverpool last week, the pressure has increased on Mrs May to show leadership and prove that she's still in control of her party. She'll give her keynote speech on Wednesday, the final day of the conference, and her supporters will hope that it goes better than this time last year, when a prankster invaded the stage, a persistent cough meant she almost lost her voice, and the conference slogan even fell off the wall behind her.
The Conservative Party is meeting for their annual conference in Birmingham this week, and it looks set to be a bumpy one. After a successful week for Jeremy Corbyn in Liverpool, the Conservatives are now under much more pressure to show they are delivering as the party of government. Theresa May is also under a lot of strain for her Brexit strategy. Her so-called Chequers plan for a softer Brexit isn't really going anywhere, and many of her cabinet and MPs want her to junk it. Plus, there are questions about whether this will be her last party conference as Prime Minister. Many in her party certainly think it should be, so watch out for plenty of succession planning and elbowing to succeed her in Downing Street.
And that's what the week ahead looks like from the Financial Times in London.